Oh,
Okay. All right. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, let's see how that works. It looks like it's recording there now. That's great. Welcome everyone to another Ask the Professionals. Very excited about this topic today. Just a little bit of intro information about OZeWAI, but I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of country, which is what we do here in Australia. I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting today in Canberra, and pay respects to the elders both past and present. And I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander peoples in attendance today. And feel free to put in the chat where you are paying your respects from today. And also, if you'd like to just share, a hello to the other people on the call, feel free to do that. We will be taking questions in the chat as well, and we'll put them through to the moderator, to Amanda, to decide how they get sent back. But we tend to get through our questions in the chat, so please ask as many as you like. Just a little bit about OZeWAI. We're a not-for-profit professional membership organisation for digital accessibility professionals, mainly in Australia and in the Asia Pacific, but we do have a lot of connections with our global counterparts as well. And this is why we are very happy to have Andrew join us here from the US and the work that he's doing in Maryland government. We have some wonderful sessions coming up. We also have some training coming up for members this year as well, some mobile app training, so keep an eye out for that. And we also have started a wonderful partnership on mentoring program with Mutually. So please check out the website and share anything that, and I'll share some links as we go through about a little bit about OZeWAI as we go. So please look to join. We have a very small advocacy level of $50 a year. And we are doing some more research. We've been a professional membership for 2 years now, and we're doing research in how we can improve our membership. So your feedback is very welcome at any time. All right, I'm going to, my name is Bree Norton. I'm co-chair with Amanda Mace of OZeWAI, and Amanda is moderating today, and I'm going to hand it over to Amanda to get things going. Thank you all.
perfect. Thank you so much, Bree. And please, people, feel free to put on your cameras if you like. We like to be able to see faces. That's always good. And it's not just me staring at myself and the three panelists. So by all means, turn on your cameras, wave hello. Bree's going to keep an eye on the chat and send through any questions to me. I can't promise that we will get through all of those questions. I rarely am able to get through all of them, but I will try as best I can to fit them in. So a really quick introduction of myself before I turn to our fantastic panelists. My name's Amanda Mace. My day job is actually Vice President of Grackle Docs Australasia. So I look after the region and actually our manual audit team as well for Grackle Docs. But my role today is actually as moderator and co-chair, as Bree mentioned, of OZeWAI, the role that I take a lot of pride in, to be part of this group and lead sort of the strategic approach of how we as professionals continue to progress the industry in this region. So with that said, that's more than enough about me. We have three fantastic panelists today who are doing really good work, and I can't wait to dig in. So I'm going to do a really quick, I'll point to each of you. The way I generally run these sessions, if you haven't heard me moderate before, is all direct questions, sometimes to all three of you, sometimes to one at a time or one or two based on various experience. As always, feel free to interrupt me. I do tell people that they're welcome to interrupt me as long as they promise not to ask for a snack. If you ask for a snack, I'm going to say it's okay, but it needs to be an apple. And if you don't want an apple, I'll tell you what I tell my kids, then you're not that hungry. So, with that said, Andrew, why don't you give us a bit of an introduction, your name, your role, what you do, and I'd really love to hear a bit about how you're doing leadership at Maryland.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate the warm introduction. So my name is Andrew Drummond. I currently serve as the State Director of Digital Accessibility for the state of Maryland. I work out of Department of Information Technology. So that's the agency that I'm a part of. And the subset of the agency that I'm part of is something called Maryland Digital Service. So a full digital service shop that's led by Deputy Secretary Marcy Jacobs. She's our Chief Digital Experience Officer. I've worked for Department of Information Technology for about 3 years now in this role. I've worked for the state of Maryland for 9 years, and I've worked in the space for about 14 years. I've also a professor at a local university as well, and kind of one of my proud achievements is I created the nation's first undergraduate level course focused on digital accessibility testing and reporting. Also authored Maryland's inaugural digital accessibility policy. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm originally from the United Kingdom, from Great Britain. Originally from a place called Newcastle.
Amazing. Ben, let's do a quick introduction to you, your title, what you do, and really a quick summary of how you're leading accessibility at Telstra.
Thanks, Amanda. So Ben Pintos-Oliver, I'm the head of accessibility at Telstra. I think I've been here for just coming on 7 years now. Accessibility was once a little bit of a thing done in magic time, in sort of the dark alleys of the design teams, trying to do a little bit of training here and there. And we'd like to say that here at Telstra, over those years, we've really developed an enterprise-wide accessibility program, one that is sort of built into all parts of the business, not just within design or development, but part of our policy, the way we do compliance and risk, the way we do product life cycle, testing, and research as well. We've started to integrate this not only within our digital assets, but also within our retail stores, our call centres, and also across many different services that are available for people with disability, like a disability equipment program or the National Relay Service. And we've also been really starting to push for innovation within our products as well. So Telstra's Touch and Track AFL experience, allowing people with vision impairments to also get involved in the game. And also recently with our new TSM4 modem as well, making that much more accessible. I love the world of accessibility. I wake up with it every single day, which is sort of the driving force of what gets me out of bed. And I just love working with the amazing team that we've got here at Telstra and all the people within the industry who just sort of bring so much experience and great stories into the mix as well.
Yeah, Ben, I've had the pleasure of chatting to the Telstra team, and they're a great bunch, and you're doing great work there. Can't wait to talk to you more about it. Greg, last but not least, doing the amazing work, especially around policy-driven things at Service New South Wales. Can you give us similar, a real quick?
Thanks, Amanda. Greg Alchin, I'm the Principal Accessibility Specialist at Service New South Wales. We're a state government agency, and it's the one-stop shop or single front door for New South Wales government services. So within our digital space where I'm building capacity and culture on accessibility, we've got 67 product teams across with about 300 staff all up, and about 1,300 transactions that we look after. So working across all the areas like Ben was talking about, putting on multiple hats, as Amanda knows, so that broader agency and leadership piece goes across our community of practice at a state government level, our LE Compact, but then also sitting on Standards Australia, and also working with the Human Rights Commission some time ago, just on developing the equal access to digital goods and services guidelines.
Amazing. Look, you're all doing such great work. This is going to be such a fantastic conversation. I want to pick up, Greg, on something you said about the multiple hats, because so many of us wear multiple hats. And even just hearing the shortest summary of all the amazing work that each of you are doing, you're clearly all wearing an awful lot of different hats. And there's a lot encapsulated in accessibility. So what's always really interesting is kind of that first step. What got you into not just accessibility but leadership in accessibility? What was the pull? Which hat was the first hat you wore? Andrew, do you want to start?
And so I've been in, like I said, I've been in the space for about 14 years. Originally started out actually as a many years ago as a special education teacher and working with students with various needs, including low incidence disabilities such as multiple disabilities like blindness and cerebral palsy, that type of thing. And I thought there's got to be a better way to, this was a while back, better way to help these students, and realized there was lots of issues around them accessing computers within the classroom. And it's really started getting into learning more about assistive technology. Then I taking a postgraduate certificate in assistive technology at a university in Virginia called George Mason University. And then from there, kind of sparked my interest in assistive technologies and inclusivity and accessibility. And that was probably about 15, 16 years ago. And that's kind of how I got into this space.
And did leadership call to you right away, or was it something that gradually built over time?
Actually, yeah. So my first role in straight up accessibility was a leadership role at a university, and I was kind of responsible for focused on assistive technology and accessibility support for students with blindness and low vision. So yeah, I was kind of immediately kind of set up a accessibility shop and build out a team of interns, student workers to help us with document mediation and help us do all of the things that we needed to do to support students and university students in Maryland.
So, Ben, I want to ask you the same question. And what's really, I've known you probably for those 7 years you've been at Telstra now. Passion is sort of the leader, and you spoke about that a bit when you summed up your intro. Was it straight into leadership and accessibility became the passion as part of your leadership, or which came first?
Ooh, there was a lack of leadership, I would say, in that particular space. Nobody was doing it very well. It was always considered a little thing that we do off the side of some executive, not within their title though. And so I think that's really drove me to shift beyond what I was doing at the time, which was design systems, like really thinking meticulously about design, both from a coding and a design perspective, and making sure at the same time as you build those foundations, you're building it in a fully accessible format. And that just sort of flowered into the big crystal ball that is accessibility. And it kind of got to a point where I was sort of asked, is this something that you want to do full time? And I said, absolutely. And I think it was a lot of sort of interesting sort of people in my life suddenly sort of made me realize this is something that I really want to do. This is something I want to specialize in. And so sort of bringing together all those moments and basically convincing the business, this is a really important thing, not just from a legal standpoint, but for a commercial value that it can bring as well. And so that sort of that sprung-board us from leadership from the greater design system side of things into a world that was dedicated purely to accessibility.
The change that we've seen in the region around, I guess, valuing leadership within this. Greg, you've been around the industry for probably the longest of all of us. I'm really curious to hear your take on that transition and maturity within Australia to go from the add-on, oh, accessibility is this thing that sits with a director under some sort of inclusive byline, to where now we have three people on this panel who literally have accessibility as part of their role in non-accessibility firms. What was that like, that transition like, and how did that influence your own leadership?
I think part of the change is it's an internal and an external advocacy at the same time, and helping leaders, broader leadership, to see that accessibility will actually solve a range of their key outcomes that the general leadership wants to achieve. When they see that there is that business imperative, and that's when they go, oh, I get it. That's a whole demystification. So, but what it's about, and like that came back to my start, where trying to do some work and going, I'm spending all this energy butting heads and trying to, get the thing across the line, and then going, how do we do it at scale? How do we, resolve some of these things? And that was finding the different ways. So it was advocating up, but also looping back around and having those conversations. And you have those conversations in different ways. So what does Treasury understand about this compared to, say, a general manager understand this? The key message is still the same, but it's the language that you use that's different. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years. It's knowing how to speak multiple languages. You learn to speak Treasury, which is an interesting language to speak. But in doing so, that's where you make the change. And I think the other one, I know certainly from my involvement with Ben and everybody here, is that we don't do it on our own. And so how do you work together? And how do you bring people along that journey? And the more open I believe the more open you are, the more that you see people want to become part of that journey, and also opening yourself up to constant learning. I've always said the day I stop learning is the day I die. And I think that's part of that. And I always challenge younger members that I'm working with, go, guys, you've got different perspectives to me. Challenge me. I'm the old black. Come and challenge me. Because I said we can grow together.
So I want to pick up really quickly on what you talked about messaging there. I immediately wrote down notes. So if I'm looking down, by the way, I'm not, playing Monopoly Go, I promise. I'm writing notes. And there's been a meeting or two Monopoly Go has been necessary to get me through, but not this one. No, I wrote down messaging right away because messaging is such an important part of leadership in general, but particularly in accessibility, because the messaging is actually to more than one group. And I know everyone here really wants to hear about the messaging to sort of the C-suite executive level, because that is how we get that right, how we push for those roles to get buy-in for a lead role like accessibility in a non-accessibility firm. But I want to ask Greg, we talked about the multiple hats, the multiple messaging, that skill to be able to talk to the doer and the decision maker. How do you find the balance? And are there any tips, like really quick tips that you could give to the people listening today?
Yeah, look, I think the first one that was given to me many years ago is if you understand what's the key performance indicators of the executives that you're dealing with, and you can show
web results.
How you're going to be a solution to what are their KPIs, that gives you the in.
Yeah.
And
great advice.
That's the simplest and easiest way to put that, I think.
Andrew, when you were sort of in the infancy of this role within Maryland, I'm curious because messaging is always fascinating in America versus here, in the sense that the laws are just that much more stringent. America's much more litigious. Has that policy law sort of back? And I will come back to Ben and Greg about policy in a moment, but from a law perspective, Title II obviously is being updated, in a month and a few days, hopefully, provided there's no delays. How has that changed your messaging, or has it not? Have you kind of put that to the side?
I think ADA Title II final rule from the U.S. Department of Justice. I think that's been a fantastic force and function. In all honesty, it's really made folks here in the U.S. at least to work at if you work in state government or municipal government, whether it's a city or a town, really pay attention to accessibility. So there is just an absolute massive surge in vendors doing business. So it's great for vendors. There's an absolute massive surge in accessibility jobs. I've never seen this many accessibility jobs out there right now. So I do see lots of positives. I would say that many states across the nation, obviously I work with an organization called NASIO, the National Association of State CIOs. And that organization is a fantastic organization that really focuses on helping state IT departments. And we've done like lots of like fantastic work around kind of mentorship and governance. I helped lead some work around governance and helping states build out, and some cities too, build out their initial governance around the digital accessibility. So again, I think it's been a fantastic force and function. And I'm obviously, well aware that the US is obviously probably way more litigious than out in Australia. But yeah, again, I think it's the situation that the Department of Justice has put us in has really made everybody think about accessibility, and accessibility has definitely become a mainstream conversation. Like, it is something that is talked about a lot now. Then in 2-3 years ago, it was very peripheral. And I think, at least in Maryland, we're very fortunate to have IT leaders that are very forward thinking and proactive, and that have been just really embraced accessibility. And I was brought to the Department of IT to stand up the state's first Office of Digital Accessibility, one of the first digital accessibility offices in the nation. And we're building out a fantastic team, created a wonderful community of practice, got the state's first comprehensive digital accessibility policy off the ground. And, just lots of work around governance, lots of work around programming, lots of work around training. I would say, like, the surge of training, we've trained close to 800 state staff around digital accessibility and document accessibility in the past few months. So just, lots of training, lots of edification, and just building capacity. And how can we do accessibility at scale? And it's by edification of state staff, making people that typically wouldn't do accessibility learn a little bit about accessibility, and get to the stage where they're able to author accessible electronic content, which is the direction that Maryland is heading in. And I'm really proud of the work we've done so far.
And it really is fantastic. And it's an interesting difference because, of course, Europe has the Accessibility Act, Canada has an Accessibility Act. Title II is making a huge push for better accessibility in America. And here, while we have a Disability Discrimination Act, what we don't have is an Accessibility Act, which is something that one day I hope we'll have. Ben, I want to go to you. There's so many questions I have off the back of that response, Andrew. I can't even, I'm trying to hold it all in. But I don't want to lose the momentum to talk about laws, policies, and mandates. So, Ben, one of the things that has, I think, probably motivated Telstra to do the great things that they've done, is some of the mandates for the telcos. So I'd really love to hear how that's impacting your messaging. So the mandates obviously have a certain requirement around them. Of course, we do have the DDA, but there's less bite to that than a mandate. So how's that affecting your messaging when you're talking both to higher ups and sort of to the operational people on the ground?
Yeah, look, I think this is a fast evolving space. We see regulations starting to move at a pace that we've not seen for quite some time. Definitely within the telco space, we've got some very stringent obligations where the explicit nature of the wording really helps us, I guess, in a sense that it says you must do this, not have regard. Secondly, it is time bound, where you have to release accessible before you go live. That makes a huge difference as well. And I guess for both speaking, messaging upwards as well as to the product teams, that makes life a lot easier, because you're no longer having to have the conversation of when and how much. It is mandated. You cannot choose to not do this. So that makes it a hell of a lot easier. But it still means you have to start at the base level and foundational level, which is awareness 101. What is a disability? You have to demystify a lot of those things, particularly with teams that are coming from many different countries and backgrounds and understandings. I think getting that alignment on what does it mean to have a disability, what does that have from a human perspective, the inability to experience something, and then how do you connect that to the legal system that that obligates you to go and do that. So I think from an executive perspective, you're talking about meeting regulatory requirements. This is about risk and compliance. It also is about cost avoidance, law, reputational risk. And there are elements that can then string off that around efficiencies as well. The cost of going back and having to go fix things can cost you 3 to 30 times the amount to go and do it. Not only is that a cost to the business, but hey, guess what? Your designers and developers, they don't want to have to do rework. Nobody wants to. So this regulation really helps us to get it right the first time and to put those teams in a good shape so that they're thinking about these things from early research to design to development and not having to do the rework. So I think that's really important. And those practical skills, getting in at that production level and talking to the teams around the ethics and the reputation, but also the practical skills. What do I need to get this done? We know that you as a developer or you as a designer don't want to have to redo these things. So how do we build up your understanding of the success criteria so it's not a bit of a guessing game and it's not a job of the accessibility specialist to play the referee and call the whistle just before launch and say, sorry, I'm finding a couple of defects. People are sitting there scratching their head going, I don't even know what the problem is. And I've got to go away and fix it now. And now I'm on the clock. So it's how do you build up that understanding right from the get-go and really connect the people that have that deep understanding, building champions in the design and development teams and getting them to support the rest of the business as well. And I think that's the biggest challenge is that's a lot easier to do on one project, on one website, on one app. How do you do that at scale? That's the trickiest thing in the world. And I think that's where the world of accessibility is at the moment. Businesses are struggling to try and work out how do you do that at scale. And that's the challenge for all of us.
Yeah, so it kind of comes back to what Andrew was saying a little bit about this big push in America with Title II changing, and now the vendors are doing really well. Grackle Docs is benefiting from that. I'll be honest. American clients are crawling to beg us for. We're inundated because they're just trying to meet this deadline and understand it more. And it brings up a really interesting question. And Greg, I'm going to go to you first and then to Andrew, because I'm really interested in this push. So Service New South Wales and you personally have been pushing a new policy, which will come into effect soon, hopefully.
Yes.
That policy around digital accessibility, the potential of that coming to fruition. And I've had thank you very much for sharing. I've had a bit of a sneak peek at the policy and what it'll mean. Does that mean that there's likely to be a skills shortage from an education point of view? We know, we did research here at OZeWAI that in Australia there are not enough accessibility experts, let alone people who need that sort of to be part of their job, designers, developers, UXers, so on and so forth, content people. So Greg, what's your approach coming in with this policy at New South Wales? When it
It's a
comes to
really good question, Amanda. And look, one of the things is the policy in and of itself is just the first part of the conversation. And so we know from historically what we've done at Service, where we went, hey, do you know what? First off, we did a baseline assessment. We used, oh, surprise, surprise, the accessibility maturity model to get that. But then what it helped to do is identify training needs as well as part of the other dimensions it did. So we made sure that there was role-specific training. So onboarding includes a session on accessibility, a session on inclusive design. And also now there's role-specific training for everybody. And we're building that into the policy as well. So as we're rolling this out, and this thing we learned from Apple called stickiness, we have also tied it into our disability inclusion action plan as well. So for instance, there'll be this uplift. Where are we going to start? Get your L plates, guys. Go and learn how to make an accessible Word document or a PowerPoint. Then you can leverage on to more specific training that is role specific, which I kind of call like, yes, do you need your heavy vehicle license? You go and get your heavy vehicle license, but first get your real license first, you know. And so building that up for people is the key part. So take that along, but also going, here are some tips and tricks. Here are some core tools you can all use. What are things? So there's a lot of people who are willing but don't know how to get across the river. The biggest thing is building that in as part and parcel of that whole approach. And I think the other one, coming back to an earlier part of the conversation, in the language with the executive, and learning from the politicians, it comes down to 3 words: every customer can. And we go, so what does that mean? Let's unpack that. And then for the executive, as part of this, because you want to continue that buy-in and them supporting this, it's going, I'm not asking the executive to be an accessibility specialist. I'm asking them to be a good executive. So, hey, do you know what your obligations are? Do you know what good looks like? Do you have systems and processes to deliver good? And how do you know your systems and processes are working? And any good executive, doesn't matter what the topic, that's what they need to know. They don't have to be the specialist. And that's when you say, we're here to help you. We're here to help answer those questions. So if you get called from a political perspective, you got called into Senate estimates or wherever, you've got these answers. Or it could be you've got to answer a shareholder. Have you got the answers to these? We make sure you've got the answers, you've got the systems, but that's again, we're aligning it with standards. So EN 301549, AS, EN 17161 to do with design for all, and risk management, which would all of those things. And I think that's the other part of it. We're aligning our practices where the cyber has been and others have been, and we're just going, guys, it's just like everything else. We're just putting good governance in here. We know where we want to get. We know the benefits. How do we align it all together? And when we do, and we have the plan, it makes it easier. Still, challenges along the way, but they can see you've got a plan to get there.
So that's such a fantastic piece of advice. And I love the every customer can. I think that's what a great challenge. What do we mean when we say that?
Yeah.
Ben, I wanted to ask you about building out the team at Telstra, and that idea of, because there is so much education that needs to happen, both the role specific stuff, but then also bringing in enough people who have the expertise. You can't be at a company like Telstra, you can't be the only expert in the room. So how bringing that team along to actually have a team, what was the first step in that? And I guess first step, and then also maybe a challenge that you had in that.
Oh, the whole thing was the challenge.
Fair. The honest answer.
Yeah, no, it honestly was, and it was the best challenge in the world. Look, one of the first things that I did is I hired lived experience into the team, and that was a common thread that sort of pulled through over the last 7 years, really. And I think we can quite proudly say that I think 50% of our team of around 25 specialists are people living with disability themselves. And so I think that was really critical for us, and was kind of something that I put in my head as a first step was, how do we do this? How do we make sure that we're not just reading from a set of standards and going, I think it's like this. Let's try and get a couple of people in and really sort of build that out. And the interesting thing that came out of that was not just the training that we put ourselves through, but it was the daily interactions between ourselves that we actually learnt the most. So there was a couple of people in my team where I'd be doing one-on-ones with them, and I'd learn through those interactions what it is like for a screen reader or for an auditory impairment, and the way in which we communicate back and forth with each other. I learnt so much more through that than I have with any other way of going online to a university or reading material online. And that's been huge, because that's the that's how we actually live and engage with technology and communicate with each other. That stuff, you can't learn that through a university. You can learn the standards, you can learn a whole bunch of other things online, but that was really, really important. So that's something that we've kept sort of really true and core to us. And we proudly put that, up for everyone else to see as well. But I think as we sort of then grew the team, I always told my executives, I only need 2 more. So every time they said, oh, how's it all going? I'm like, it's fantastic. It's going really well. I just need 2 more. Oh, what's that for? Well, we've got the website pretty much under wraps, but we've got this app, and I need app-specific specialty skills because it's a different assistive technology. And those skills, you can't just pull a web developer on AEM and pull them across onto another program language and expect them to do it instantly. So yeah, I was always able to just manipulate, no, that's not the right word, to navigate the way.
Manage. We don't manipulate, we manage.
Our way through that all just by sort of saying, look, there are specialist areas here that we need to consider. And the same process we're going through right now as we're starting to really build out things like our physical stores, really starting to move beyond the Australian building standards into the way in which we interact with products and information and wayfinding and signage, and that intersection between digital as well. And so with that, we're going to have to start thinking about different skills. But I think the interesting thing that's happened probably over those 7 years is that we've just truly sort of realized there is a huge skill shortage. There are only so many businesses within Australia that specialize in this space, and those teams are not huge. And so it is very competitive out there when you're trying to find an accessibility specialist out there. And we have this sort of lone wolf specialist idea that sort of sits out there where they've educated themselves about all the different standards, but sometimes don't go to the length and degree where you need to absolutely do everything and check it all off. And that can be a little bit of a dangerous situation where if you're not covering off all the standards, you're not covering off the full level of compliance to the minimal standard. And so we've had to sort of educate ourselves as we've hired in people to fill in those gaps. And that's been really important. But where you can actually go to get that training and that certification is very, very minimal. And I think there's a big job that Australia has to do around educating, not just for accessibility specialists, but the designers and developers of these industries as well, and making sure that part of how you become a designer or developer is, in a part, being accessible as well. So I think there's a bit of a two-pronged approach there.
100%. I can say from an OZeWAI perspective, this is a huge drive for me in our apprenticeship project. So if you haven't heard about our apprenticeship project, I'm really happy to have a conversation offline about that. But I 100% agree. We know there's a skills shortage. Future Skills Organization came in and helped us do that research. We knew it anecdotally. Now we know it with fact and research backing us up. But we have that data, and we very much need to get the federal government on board to help us fix this before it becomes a real problem. And I'm the other thing, I guess, is around mentorship. I don't know a single person who didn't kind of just fall into accessibility and become really passionate about it, and their passion drove their education. Most of us have been very lucky to have a mentor to bring us on that journey. And some of us just had to figure it out for ourselves. So what that means is not only do we have a lack of experts in the field, but then every expert is expected to be an expert in all things accessibility. And I've got a very good friend that most people in this group might know. Julie Grundy used to say that if you can see it on a screen, there's a rule for that. And That's a lot of rules and it's a lot to know. And no one person can know all of the things about all of the digital assets that possibly exist. And so putting that on one person, especially a single accessibility lead in a big company, it's just too much. Now, Andrew, I do want to, because I'm curious, building in Maryland this program for an Office for Digital Accessibility. If you had the same sort of struggles that Greg and Ben are sort of talking about, that I'm talking about, where we know there are people who have some knowledge, maybe, but they aren't across all the things they need to be across, and therefore they're kind of learning on the job, and it takes more uplift for the organization hiring to get them to where they need them to be. Was that also an issue in Maryland when you were building out your office?
Um, I would actually say there was there was there is somewhat of a skills shortage in certain areas, I would say. In the accessibility kind of space over here in the US, it's definitely the case that there's not enough accessibility folks to go around. You can just jump on LinkedIn right now or Indeed or A1Y jobs and just see hundreds and hundreds of roles, which is great for the economy for sure, definitely. Um, so I actually tried to come up with a bit of an innovative approach. What we did is we launched an internship program. So we launched a phenomenal internship program, and we've pushed like several folks who went through this, our internship program where they basically learn all of the things. They learn about how to become an accessibility tester, how to, write comprehensive accessibility reports, learn how to remediate accessibility documents, learn how to, look through VPATs, learn how to work with designers and work with UX specialists and really think about we're trying to really use like the born accessible approach where when a solution has been built out, I don't know if you may call it shift left approach in the US in Australia, but in the US it's either shift left or born accessible. But we're really we not just it's not just like what we say, we really try to live by it and kind of live and die by all that and really focus on that real shift left and making sure that accessibility starts early in the process, not where we're thinking about accessibility right at the end and really trying to a great example would be Maryland's web design system, which is based on the US web design system that the US federal government utilizes in Maryland. We've adapted that and Marylandized it, so to speak. As that was being built out, it was determined that we're going to build out this fantastic web design system, but not just that, we're going to make sure that those templates are tested before they go live, and we're going to build out just a fantastic component, web component repository, and that every single web component is tested. So at launch, at inception, that these new websites that are being launched across the state are accessible at the start. The internship program has just been phenomenal. And we've actually now got several employees who are now full-time employees that came through the internship program. And primarily, I've targeted students that come to us with a human-centered computing background. So they're already thinking about UX, they're already thinking about UI and human-centered interaction and how people. So they've already got lots of fantastic transferable skills and some skills that many accessibility specialists don't have. So they've got some great skills, and now we just need to teach them accessibility. So they learn all of the things. They learn how to do consultations. They learn how to test comprehensively against the WCAG standards of Maryland, relying to WCAG 2.1, AA success criteria. So we kind of coach them up. We partner them with more senior specialists. We'll test in tandem. We'll test in groups. We'll teach them all of the things. And we've got just like a fantastic pipeline. We're just producing fantastic accessibility professionals. Some of these folks have been doing accessibility for a year. You sat down with them, you would have thought they've been doing accessibility for 10 years. So
It's exciting to see that, and it's validating for me as someone driving the apprenticeship program for OZeWAI, because that's very much what we want to do. We looked at internship, but went with the apprenticeship type model ultimately. But it's very validating to hear how successful that can be. We know that the state of California, for example, has an apprenticeship model. that they had come through, I can't remember, a few years ago now, which really
Right.
drove my interest in doing it. We know that the UK has it, and I think that it absolutely can work in this country.
Right.
And especially we've got really great, teams at
Could you
Service New
define
South
the
Wales
difference,
and Telstra.
man? Would you be able to define the difference between an apprenticeship and an internship? Because I think maybe it may end up being because these
Yes.
internships are paid roles, and
Yeah,
they
so with an apprenticeship, you get the learning component alongside. So there would be a formal registered training organization that would provide the learning component alongside the work experience.
okay,
So
gotcha.
yeah, it's a bit of a more formalized. Ideally, we would get, without taking over this conversation, we would get government support and have companies be reimbursed a little bit during that apprenticeship, so that the apprentice is not just in a paid role, but the company's getting credited in some way to take on an apprentice, and put them through that sort of work experience. So we would look to tap a Telstra on the shoulder, for example, and be like, hey, you're already doing this job. We might look to accessibility firms like mine, like Grackle Docs, because we're already doing this job. Frankly, I've had staff leave to go to some of the accessibility teams, including Ben's, after I've trained them up, because then they're experts and they can move on and get different types of experience, especially in the corporate world, which when you work in a firm, it's a different feel than when you work inside a Telstra or a Coles. Or an ANZ, for example. So that we did look at sort of an internship model, but as OZeWAI, it would have been a lot harder, A, for us to drive that, and B, it then is company driven, and so that then has to be the the driving force is a little bit different versus if we can get a real federally backed apprenticeship model. I think that gets a lot more drive and a lot more companies involved. I think we can get Telstra is an example of a really big accessibility team here in Australia, but we do have lots of smaller teams who need more people but can't afford an FTE for that. So trying to find and meet people where they're at right now to see the value in it. I think that's where we ended up with the apprenticeship. I don't want to steal the conversation though, because you guys are so
No,
fantastic, but
no,
it's
no.
really
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. That is definitely very interesting. So we actually have two. I still call it internship, but maybe it is actually in fact an apprenticeship. So we have the regular kind of the one that we do through the state, and we work with local universities. We also have a program called through DSEI, so the Department of Service and Civic Innovation. And this sounds more like but we have one of these DSEI service members. That's what we call them. So they're called service members instead of apprentices. But they come from an agency. They interview it's local young folks. They interview, and then they become onboarded with the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, and then they get to interview with either public sector, so maybe like for example Department of Information Technology, or they could work for a private organization. So it sounds more like an apprenticeship, like I would see
Mm,
back in the UK or Australia. And at the same time, we also encourage them to get they get the U.S. Department of USDHS Trusted Tester certification. Some folks are getting like IAAP CPAC, and these folks are getting like real world experience and also getting a paycheck at the same time. And
yeah.
we're it's been really fantastic. So yeah, I guess I guess we do have an apprenticeship type program too. And so we right now currently have one intern and one apprentice, if that's the case.
And it's really interesting to see where this is going, like certainly, and not just regionally, but globally, because there is a real push. We've seen, obviously, last year with the EAA coming out in Europe, this big push to understand so much more. And there are different levels within accessibility. So you've got you guys who are kind of sitting at the top of the top, talking to the executives, but then you need the doers. And you need the people who are, experts in native no, mobile apps. And you need the experts who are, developers. And you need the experts who are UXers who have a real focus from an accessibility point in that role for a very specific part of it. A lot of people actually, I think one of the more interesting conversations I've had in the past is this role specific thing, building out accessibility engineers, for example. That is really just one part of accessibility expertise. And to pretend like having a team of accessibility engineers is going to fix all of the problems would be a very big mistake. As someone who works with lots of organizations who go, but we have a team of 5 accessibility engineers. And I'm like, that's awesome. But you don't have a single UXer or content person who understands accessibility. So you're still at a loss. Um, so it's really interesting to hear because I think, and the reason I'm tying this into your leadership is so much of this comes down to education on your part. And again, wearing all those different hats. Um, Greg, when you wear all of these hats and you're pushing out new policies and you're training up staff and you're doing, the role specific training, the general overview, hey, you need to know this is a thing. How do you keep Service New South Wales focused on this? Because it's a lot to do and still drive accessibility as a whole in a program.
Yeah, look, good question. I think the biggest thing we do is look at our governance process. So, how we bake accessibility in. So we now understand, for instance, here's what we expect of a product manager, of a designer, of an engineer. Here's who takes lead roles within the software development lifecycle or from a procurement. But then if I'm just looking at software, the life cycle there, one of the things that we've done is, hey guys, we expect you to report every 6 months on the level of accessibility of your product. And now we're in the process of refining our dashboards, because there's the dashboard I want to see from a techie perspective, and what's the one the leaders need to see? Yeah, are things going up or down? And what we've just done is mapped the accessibility criteria against the target audience that's being impacted. Oh, this criteria impacts people who are blind or low vision or this. Because really, what's the conversation with leaders? Who's being impacted? Don't tell me what, oh, they're failing 1.3.1 or whatever, because that means nothing. Again, put it in a language that they understand. And so that's where what I see up behind the hood will be one thing, but what the leaders will see in the next generation of our dashboard will be something else. But that regular reporting allows us to do that. You've got to have that transparency to build trust and accountability.
So I know that we had a question in the chat around like, does accessibility need its own governance process? And having spoken to you, Greg, and you've been on various times, the answer, of course, is yes. Building that out and getting buy-in for a governance process around accessibility when what we have is the current structures are occasionally flimsy at best, being honest. How do you start that process? And I'm going to start with Greg, just because I know you're kind of in the middle of proposing this and hopefully getting it through. But then I'm really curious then how you went about it as well. So, Greg, how do you start that process of building governance into accessibility?
The biggest thing is I think it's the stories you tell. And so when guys, what's the data? We're showing different bits of data, and I go, yeah, look, we shipped 370 million, whatever. And I go, yeah, you shipped 3 million sausages. How many people didn't want sausages? How many of those sausages had salmonella? How many people were vegans? And did we know what the customers really wanted? So I said, let's come back and go get the right data to tell the right story.
Absolutely. So my
Getting
colleague,
away from the vanity metrics.
absolutely. My colleague says data is just data. It's not good or bad. It's just
That's
data.
right.
Ben, what about you? How did Telstra's a big organization. I imagine there was a lot of pushing uphill to build out governance processes around this, even with a mandate that's so specific.
Yeah, absolutely. And to use Greg's fantastic term there of sausages, which resonates with me because I'm about to do the Bunnings barbecue piece on the weekend. So I'm all about the sausages at the moment.
We'll have to explain that to Andrew a little later.
Yes. Yeah, kind of like IKEA, but with a barbecue out the front. All right. So look,
that may have made it worse, Ben.
That could have made it worse. Sorry. I'll chat to you offline, Andrew. Look, I think when you start this off, it's being able to build into what the business already has, which is risk and compliance. Those are the two things that are absolutely there. And that can be done in many different ways, but it's about sitting down with your risk and compliance teams and understanding what are the controls that you have in place, what are the definitions of getting something done right versus failing it, and being really sort of black and white with that. Once you have established that, you can then leverage the systems that they already have. You don't have to build anything new, and you can actually lean on your risk team to be doing a lot of that. You just got to provide them the data. So if you have a mission team that you're supporting that's building a website, when there is a defect that is found, you can raise that as a JIRA ticket, assign that to a developer, note when that ticket has been fixed, and basically record that data. So you can record how many defects have you found versus how many have you fixed. It's a really simple finger on the pulse maturity score that you can have for any asset. And it's good because at any time of the year, those numbers might be up or they might be down. And most importantly, it doesn't really matter what the number is as long as there is a story behind it. You could be low in your 60s. 60% of all defects found have been fixed. Now, that might be because 2 days ago, your accessibility specialist or somebody has found 30 defects. And the team just hasn't had enough time yet to go back and fix those. That's an interesting story. But then how do you tether that to, well, what does it relate to? Is it to do with content? Is it to do with the systemic foundational reusable patterns that are being used? Is it because a whole bunch of developers left your business and a whole bunch of new ones have come in that know nothing about accessibility? And so what we've done over the years is we've stopped looking at accessibility metrics and the insights behind them just as an accessibility team. And we have partnered with the mission teams, the POs, the product owners, the designers and developers to look at the data and to extract those insights and then play it back to us. So we have these monthly sessions now, which we call just compliance accessibility, and they turn up every single month and they explain to us, here are our numbers. Here's how many defects we have found versus fixed. Here's how many times we have released below standard. Here are the trending success criteria that have failed or passed. And all of that information has been really great at the mission level. But as Greg said, the execs don't want to hear that. They want to know what that big number is. So we just simply add those numbers together. Different regulations means that different digital assets have to be considered. So for our TCP code, we have a whole bunch of digital assets that we add up together and give a summary view of what that looks like. And we can show how mature is accessibility against the TCP code. And we can track that down to a very, very specific level of detail, or we can just summarize it as one specific number. And that is very compelling information for your executives because that's what they want to know. Where is the number? Why is it there? Which direction is it heading? And what are the sort of driving factors that sit behind that? So that's a really, if you can really harness your metrics in a way that tells that compelling story, that is fantastic. And then I would just be starting to then going back to the very original question, do you need a new system? Yes, you do. There are so many things to do with accessibility that a normal program cannot cover. So Greg mentioned it before, companies like Microsoft, Atlassian and others, they have started to establish their accessibility maturity models. We call ours TAMM, the Telstra Accessibility Maturity Model, the never-ending pack of Tim Tams, as it's rightfully known, because it never ends. But it's fantastic because
you genie.
Yeah, rub the lamp and everything is fixed. And so with that, we start to break down, instead of having lots of disparate projects all linked together with a little maturity score, we've got a whole bunch of activity that sits under leadership, under governance, under customer-facing projects, and that could be digital, store, call center, whatever your channels are. Then we have also procurement and our training, which is agnostic of customer or employee. Then we have the employee side of things. And there's a whole bunch of extra fun stuff that sits in there around candidate experiences, support for managers, working with employees with disability, and a whole multitude of other things there. But that program allows us to use it as a maturity model. And each program has got a scoring system to know how mature are you. Things like your maturity score from digital accessibility will help to give you a bit of a guidance on where is the marker in terms of your level of maturity for your digital experiences or for your retail experiences. And so it's about being able to tell that story at a higher level with your executives to say, this is the program of work. We're definitely nowhere near where we want to be, but here are the activities that we'll be doing over this period of time. And then you can start to build in your accessibility and inclusion action plans, which is your external facing plan to say, here are 5 to 50 activities that we're going to go and do. And everyone, you can hold us to account in 3 years' time when we've hopefully delivered all of those things as well. So that maturity model just basically becomes your internal facing framework, and your action plan is the external facing one. And that's where you get the cream of the crop and you say, here are all the cool things that we're going to do. So yeah, I think that sort of shows a nice little sort of way of, how you might break that down.
I love that. And so one of the things that I say frequently, and if you've ever heard me talk about leadership and accessibility, I say you can't fix what you don't measure. And what maturity models give us is the opportunity to measure. And again, data is not good and it's not bad. It's just data. And if you have that temperature of the room in the moment, you can plan for what you need next, whether that be to grab a jumper or, wear layers that day because it's going to get warmer. I live in Perth, so generally don't need too many jumpers, except for in July and August when you're sitting in the footy and it's pouring with rain. Frequent experience for me. I'm interested in, because a lot of this is about not just messaging, but storytelling in the right way. And Ben, you brought up the point that you build on what you already have in place, which you spoke really well about how you did that at Telstra. You went to risk and compliance and said, hey, this is a problem. As a consultant with an agency, we've been brought in for exactly that reason. Someone put it on a risk register. But there's different pulls in different ways. Andrew, I'm curious, and it's interesting because America does have those slight differences to the way that we operate here. What did you already have in place? Was it really an ADA pushing type or a Section 508 or 504 type push that got you the momentum you needed to build out the program? What kind of things did you have in place to give you that momentum to push forward?
We were very fortunate in Maryland. We've had an accessibility law on the books for about 20 years, about 20 years. Maryland's non-visual access clause. So there was always really a motivation to make sure that the state's digital footprint was as accessible as it could be. So there's always been a motivation. I've been working in the state for nearly 10 years now, and it's always been an accessibility rule. So there's always been accessibility staffing and an interest in accessibility and a mandate to make sure that the footprint's accessible. But I would say that I was brought in into this role as state director for digital accessibility 3 years ago, and that was obviously well before ADA Title II final rule was going to be published. So we've been thinking about this for a while, and I just think it's just down to the proactive leadership of executives at our department. I think that's been just the key thing is proactive leadership, and people, our executives just really thinking the accessibility and usability is something that is very important because accessible websites and accessible applications are good for everybody. Something that's super accessible is going to be something that's very usable, and we just have a very human-centered approach I would say in Maryland, and making sure that we're here to, serve the public. And our governor's mantra is leave no one behind. So I think that's something that we try to hold dear to our hearts, and it's not just lip service, it's really something that's important. I think that's why, we have a very strong growing team of eight, or about eight of us, right now. It's going to be, that those numbers are continuing to increase. So we do have a pretty sizable office of accessibility, and continuing to bring in new staff. And we're doing all the things, lots of accessibility audits, remediation, consultative support for state agencies, supporting the design system. Now starting to get weaved. We're going to start weaving into working with the product teams more, and just really this complete born accessible approach. And because it's more affordable to make things accessible at the start than spend significant time trying to remediate something that's already broken. So if we can build something accessible right from the jump, that's what we'd like to do. That's kind of the way that we're doing. And I know you mentioned it earlier, Amanda. I think that's having mentors is super important, and I think the work you guys are doing over in Australia is absolutely key. I had a fantastic mentor, and my mentor was actually the gentleman that came up with the whole born accessible approach, and that's a guy called Dr. Jonathan Lazar. He's up working. He previously worked at the University of Maryland, but I believe he's been seconded. He's working up in Canada right now. So Jonathan was my mentor for several years, and I still consider him that. So I think it's really important. Whether you're going to be an individual contributor or you're going to try and be, you're going to work in a leadership role in accessibility, I think it's really important that you have a mentor. So I think the work you guys are doing around apprenticeship and mentoring folks is it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you were empowered right from the beginning. Greg, I'm from your point of view. I guess the first question is, were you empowered? The second question is, from a lived experience point of view with yourself as a person with lived experience with disability, but then also bringing in customers along on that journey really intentionally. How empowered were you to do that? Are you empowered to do that?
Yeah, look, I'm really lucky in that both our executive director and our general manager of our organisation are highly supportive, and within Service New South Wales, let alone other members of the broader customer service who, we're there to. That's why they're not New South Wales citizens, they're New South Wales customers. Everybody is a customer. And that changes that mindset. And we go, how do we do it better for the customers? The biggest thing was going, do you know who your customers are? And then breaking that apart more. And that's where building those connections. So like we have our Digital Accessibility Customer Council. So we have representatives of people with lived experience who regularly meet with our executive to go through that process. We also now have product teams coming, even at the early stages, which I'm really excited about, early stages of their development, to showcase their ideas and get feedback early and start the loop early in that process. And I think that's been really crucial to that. Yeah, it's a really good culture. And it's how we continue to grow the culture.
So I'm curious, I guess, because I suspect that a lot of people who haven't been able to grow out teams, it hasn't been so free flowing and easy to
No.
get that sort of buy-in, to be empowered. Ben, do you have advice? Because I can't imagine it was always smooth sailing at Telstra when you were going, just two more people, just two more people. What advice would you give when it's not smooth sailing and you don't feel empowered by leadership, at least not yet?
Yeah, look, I think you can never rest on your laurels, and people move jobs, right? Particularly in this environment at the moment, there are people leaving all over the place. There's no sort of such thing as a safe job anymore. And so you may put a lot of time and effort into, building a respectable relationship with somebody quite senior. And far beyond just the sort of standard, here's the progress of what my program is doing at the moment, through to, understanding them personally and some of their understanding of the disability community. And you might create these really great relationships with them, and suddenly they move on. And the business, these are very senior people, and then the business comes in with somebody else, and you've got to start from scratch all over again. And that person may have some experience or no experience in that, and the wheel starts to turn again. And you've got to think about, okay, how do I establish this relationship with this person? How do I test the grounds out? To what level of understanding do they already have of the world of accessibility? And how can I use a mixture of different sort of techniques to, get them on board and bring them on the journey with you as well? At Telstra over the last 7 years, that's probably changed 3 or 4 times. And some of them have been really hard, and I've had to go to new places to try and find new people to bring on board. And I think it's with recent changes that have come through as well, we're going through another one of those big moments of change where while our CEO is about to endorse our new accessibility and inclusion action plan coming out on the 1st of June, there are a lot of new executives that have come into the mix. And we've suddenly got this world where there's so much activity. There are some saying, yes, I'm accountable for that. Some that are saying, I'm not accountable for that. And so I think it's really important to draw up that map and show where is the accountability for some parts, where is it not, and clearly call that out with the executive team. I call it the Bermuda Triangle. It's where activities go and they suddenly disappear for a period of time. And you will find that over time, these activities, they kind of move around. If you get somebody who has to be accountable for something, they're not going to want to really be, and they'll do the least amount possible to try and support that. Others really grab onto it, and you can really help them to, push that time and effort into it and help you to connect to other people in the business who are going to make your life a little bit easier. But I think right now, our Bermuda Triangle graph that we've got around all the different activities is hopefully going to be that sort of moment in time where people are going, wow, okay, here's this new action plan that we're going to put forward. But there's a bunch of things in here that we don't really have accountability. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be looking after that? Because if it falls over, who are you going to go run to say, we need some help and support to do that? So I think that is really important. And never take your eye off the ball. Never think that I've got enough people that I've got on board with this, because they'll change. You've got to always have people in the pipeline and really think, what is their angle? Where are they coming from? Is it an efficiency angle? Is it about sales or service? Is it reputational? Is it risk or control? Because different angles may matter for some people and not others. You tell them, hey, you're going to get a $20 million fine if your team fails to do this. They go, I don't care. But they might really balk at the idea of the ethical approach. And who knows, they may have a story of somebody they have in their world, in their relationship that connects to disability, and that's going to be their driver.
Finding the light bulb switch, isn't it?
Finding
and for different people,
yeah,
different things.
Try to pull every little string, see what makes them tweak, and then use that as an opportunity to then sort of grind it through. Sometimes just people, they talk numbers. And you just got to say to them, this affects 1.85 billion people worldwide. That's an $18 trillion spending power. And then suddenly a few people will really, like gophers, they just sort of jump up like this and go, oh, that's very interesting. And now we're talking value pools, and now we're talking, the commercialization of it. Whereas a developer wouldn't give a hoot about that, because they're talking about their code practices and their ability to make sure that their code is going through in an appropriate way. And they sometimes just do not see the end outcome of somebody using their code in the real life. So sometimes that's the connection point that you just need to find. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious about what you said around accountability, because it's a huge part of when we talk about accessibility leadership, making sure there's someone accountable. Um, and I'm curious, and you don't have to tell me if Telstra does, but your thoughts on having a bit of a RACI, not for individual people, but for roles within organizations. Um, Having that RACI, is that something that you bring into practice as part of the documentation for your roadmaps and your maturity models?
Yes, absolutely. And I think over the last 7 years, we've gone from very vague accountability through to a moment in time right now where some people have turned around and said, everyone's pointed to the one person in the room and said, you're accountable for it. And they've gone, I'm just in charge of the compliance side of that, not the actual doings.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't have one without the other.
Mm.
And it's just so good to just finally have people in a room realizing that and using proper language and to understand, okay, well, where are these inconsistencies? And you can approach the accessibility side of things in many different ways. You can have multiple people in charge of accessibility through their own departments. Or you can have a singular person like a chief accessibility officer. Each has got its benefits, but each has got its cons as well. So it's about how do you find the balance? Because if you have a centralized person, then you need to have good partnership into the diversity, equity, and inclusion teams, the IT teams, marketing, the whole kit. Equally, if you do it the other way around, and you put the accountability on the CMO for marketing and the IT person for development, you've got to work out, well, how do you stitch these things all together? Otherwise, they kind of just whirl off into the distance. So you've got to find a way to be able to pull that together. And I think a lot of businesses out there, they're unsure of what to do there. Maybe sometimes it's fear of if we put it all into one basket, is it going to become too big and too costly to run? Is it a issue where, I can't have a role in every single team? That's going to be too costly. Can I just attach this to the side of somebody's role, which I think we talked about at the start of the talk here. And so, yeah, I think that's just really important to really sort of be able to break down that scope of work and just have clear accountability for all those pieces. And then the ultimate question is, whose head is going to roll if there is a problem? Like, who's going to come running and who are you going to go to for that? If you can answer some of those questions, not in an intense kind of way, it's just in a legitimate, like a fire emergency. If something happens, what do I go and do? Who am I going to go and talk to? And if you can practice those things up front and know who they are and practice those conversations, then it actually becomes really easy, because I can just go, yep, I just need this data from that team, which is copied and documented over here. I'm going to bring it to that person and say, here you go. This is the evidence that we need to say that we are doing the right thing, or we've missed something, and this is what we need to go and do to fix it. Without that, though, it just becomes this Bermuda Triangle, and companies have got to really try to work out how to avoid that.
It's an interesting connection, the accountability piece with the empowerment piece, because having accountability and not being empowered to make any change is not particularly helpful, and then head rolls for no reason. Greg, part of your motivation, having spoken to you just last month when I was in Sydney for policy, wasn't just governance, but was accountability and really holding everyone to account that this was something that they need to do. And it wasn't about slapping anyone on the wrist about doing the wrong thing. It was about sort of, like I said, taking temperature of the room and being able to plan forward. I'm curious if you can explain how you built accountability into the policy in a way that didn't, frankly, piss off everyone.
I I think the first thing is it's having multiple conversations at multiple levels, right? So we've done all the consultation with our heads of IT, heads of procurement, secretaries board, the Disability Council of New South Wales, all of those things, and going, we all want to make sure we consistently deliver good, and it's going, we all have a role to play, but does everybody know their role? And I think and building on what Ben said. So, what do I expect? So, I'm a product manager, but if I'm a director of an area, how do I know what my product quality? Because accessibility is part of the quality of their products. It's not a separate thing where then me as the accessibility person, I might look at the broader picture across the whole of the agency and also those connections into D&I and other bits and pieces. But it's all knowing we've got that piece. And it's the same from a procurement perspective. How do we know that we've been, yes, we've adopted the Australian standard, yeah, but how do you know you've actually adopted it and it's actually a living, breathing thing? And so it's then looking at the ease by which you can capture metrics, and it's us spending the time to drill down and go, here's the observable behaviours. Here's how we work with you to bake it into that process. It's not a separate process. Yeah. Oh, you're doing a requirements document. Yep, great. Did you ask about accessibility as you would with any other requirement? Here, let us work with you to build this in. Now we can see how are you going to track this? And then, oh, how are we going to weight that? So, yes, it's one requirement versus another. So, working in partnership with them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But then making sure we've got the metrics, not only in those areas, but also with the executive. It's going, you need to be able to see the good metrics. So you know when you go in to have that conversation with the minister or the Senate estimates, you've got the answers because we don't want to see you get caught short.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that advice is your partners with them. And therefore they almost want that accountability. They're like, oh yeah, that's
Okay.
part of my job. I can make that happen. And it's interesting how everything, accessibility, usability, all of it all walks of life are really about communication and relationships. And if you
Yeah.
can communicate well and you can build those relationships, at the end of the day, I don't think I've ever met a malicious CEO or
No,
CTO or CMO. People want to try and do the right thing. They maybe don't know how to, don't feel empowered to do it, or they simply didn't know it was a thing. But they generally
yeah.
want to do the right thing. And it's actually about giving them the tools to do that and be able to take
That's
that
right. And I was
ownership.
just going to say on that, Amanda, with the W3C accessibility maturity model, the first thing is going, because people go, oh, my results will be bad. We go, guys, you actually celebrate the fact that you've done this.
Yes,
You've got
absolutely.
some baseline data. But what's also the consistent messaging for government in here? You go, well, or any leader really, I'm making a data-informed decision. And so
Absolutely.
what we're doing is providing the vehicle to collect that data and to look at how they're going to grow in a consistent way. And it's having, again, that language, it's trust, it's governance, it's building informed decisions. All the things we know good leaders want to do, we're enabling those leaders.
Absolutely. Can't fix what you don't measure.
Yeah.
I love that. Look, we've got about 4 minutes. We literally could go on all day. This is one of the best talks I've ever had. I love moderating these sessions. Bree, I'll do them anytime. It's like my favorite part of the month. Getting to talk to people who are doing such amazing work. Um, One last thought, I guess, Andrew, we'll start with you. Your top piece of advice for scaling accessibility in a state government department. As soon as he finds his mute button.
Yeah, as soon as I unmute myself. That's a good one, and that's a tough one as well. I would probably say, um, cre- I would probably say shift in accessibility to the left. I think probably be the making accessibility easier by doing the thing earlier, and then piggybacking that with create more folks that are interested in accessibility. And what we've done at Maryland is we created an accessibility officer initiative. So there's an accessibility officer at every executive branch agency, and that was part of this our digital accessibility policy. So these folks were selected by their respective agency head, and we trained them up on accessibility, and they learned some things about accessibility. We're building capacity.
Amazing. Ben, your best piece of advice around scaling at a corporate level?
I think if you're really early on, it goes back to the metrics. Measure anything that's important. You need the right people with the right skill set to be able to measure those things. So if you're one person, go and measure one thing, then go on to the next thing. To Greg's point, when you get your first score back, it's not going to look good. That's fine. But at least you've then got that information. So use that data and then slowly just go through and get every single asset that your company is attached to and say, I'm connecting this back to whatever regulation is driving this, and this is where our scores are at. And then start to build a bit of a strategy off the back of it. If I had one more person, where would I put that person? Or if I had this much more capacity rather than persons, just talk about capacity, I would put it to this place, and this is what we think we could achieve with that. So I think that's probably the number one.
And Greg, as New South Wales and yourself help lead state governments here in Australia, one lasting thought about how we scale this and do better across states, which frankly are at different levels of maturity in their own right.
I think it's about openness. It's about sharing. And I know that anything that we create is Creative Commons. And I think there are things and it's being that willingness to share and also the willingness to learn. I'd also say one thing: when you're growing in your organization, start with one team and help them grow and help them tell their story. And then the next part of the story is, well, they're telling the benefits and all the things they've got. And you go, well, guys, what do we need to do to scale that to the next one? But they become your salespeople. And that's, start with the one and then let them become those advocates for you.
Amazing. Look, firstly, thank you so much to all three of you, Andrew, Ben, Greg. What a fantastic talk. I truly could have sat here and I had a million other questions just from the conversation points that came up during the talk. I'll hand over to Bree to talk about what's coming up next for OZeWAI and do a bit of a close. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I really, truly appreciated the talk. And thank you to everyone who popped questions in. I don't know if I got to all of them, but I tried. So hopefully you took away something as well.
And Amanda, thanks for great moderation too, my friend.
Yeah, well done. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, Ben, Greg. Wonderful to have you involved in this. I think we're going to have more of these sessions. And in the world of accessibility, knowing that there's these leaders and change makers out there is really, really important because, you are up on a pedestal, but we also now can see that, you're all having the same and similar challenges. And it's really nice to know, I guess, people on the call know that they're not alone. Right, in this approach. And Amanda, wonderful moderating again. You've just made it seem like an hour and a half was just like a second. We did try to do a 2-hour one, but that was just a bit too much time for people. 1.5, keep it short. We're doing really well with it. We'd love to do more. Please do the survey. Share any ideas of topics and people that you would like to see. If you are interested in doing the transcript, we're always open for volunteers to do that. So contact us. I'm also putting in the newsletter that Ricky is on the call, who just put out yesterday. We're very, very excited to share about the upcoming accessibility app training that's happening in April. End of April or around April, we've also got an accessibility events session online and offline. So that crossover in digital that we need to be aware of. And there's so much more coming up, a bit more of this year about accessible news, so many topics. And yeah, do the survey, give us some ideas of who you'd like to hear from as well. And join OZeWAI, be a part of this community, help support each other. We are slowly building up what these benefits are for people, especially those that are on their own in small teams, or in Greg's environment, nearly 400 people in your community of practice. How are we going to support that, Greg? OZeWAI is working on how we're going to be a partner for that and make sure that they get the support they need. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. I'm going to stop the recording now. If I can actually find that this time. Here we go.